session, so I made you the alternate host for that one. So if you know your WebEx password, I can get that executive session meeting started, and then I can just be ready.
When at that time or
Right now, you can actually do it. Chat.
So if we want to pull up something, how do I do that? Email will take forever to pull, so I've never
Sure.
logged on.
Yeah, I can just drop on the desktop of that.
Have a city council retreat to the Boundary Waters.
Yeah, two places at once.
Great, so when I go in, I just put I log in with my.
I'll be ready.
This is gonna.
Good evening. Welcome to the June 8th, 2020 Moorhead City Council meeting. I believe it's 5:36 p.m. Time of the meeting starts. And I'll read off. Good evening, everyone. I am Mayor Jonathan Judd. The Moorhead City Council is holding its regularly scheduled meeting using virtual meeting technology under an emergency declaration due to COVID-19. I'm in the City Council chambers along with the City Manager, Christina Volkers, City Attorney, John Shockley, as well as the City Clerk, Christina Rust, and a few other staff members. Council members are currently attending remotely. Any public comment received prior to this meeting will be read as part of the record during the applicable agenda item. The public may participate during the meeting by calling 218-299-5001. Public input will be taken by a staff member and provided to me to read during the meeting. Or you may request that your call be bridged to the virtual WebEx meeting area and speak directly during our public hearings or citizens addressing the council agenda item. Again, the public comment line is 218-299-5001. If there is no answer, please leave your message or callback number, and a member of our city staff will get back to you as promptly as possible. With that, Madam City Clerk, I will turn it over to you for a roll call.
Shelley Dahlquist.
Shelley Dahlquist.
Here.
Sarah Watson Curry.
Here.
Shelley Carlson.
Here.
Heidi Durand.
Here.
Deb White.
Here.
Larry Seljevold.
Here.
Chuck Hendrickson.
Here.
Steve Lindos.
Present.
And then in city chambers, I have City Manager Chris Volkers and City Attorney John Shockley and Mayor Jonathan Judd.
Okay. Thank you, Madam City Clerk. If we can please stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Item number 3 on the agenda this evening are our agenda amendments. Are there any amendments to tonight's agenda that has been received, Madam City Manager?
No amendments, Mr. Mayor.
Move on to item number 4, the consent agenda. Are there any?
Mayor Judd.
Yes, Councilmember Lindos?
I would like to possibly amend, I have a motion to make in terms of amending our emergency declaration. And if possible, it could happen before the executive session. So can we move the new business to before the executive session?
Yep, that's not a problem, Councilmember Lindos. And I apologize, I did receive your email. Just had a chance to check my email, actually, to ask that modification take place. So we'll be swapping items 20 and 21. Okay. Not a problem. Do we need to have a formal motion on that, or can we just? Okay, all right, good. So consider that done, Councilmember Lindos. Any further amendments to the agenda for this evening? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to number 4, consent agenda. Are there any items this evening that are being taken off consent?
None that I know of, Mr. Mayor.
Hearing no items off consent, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as written?
Councilmember Lindos moves approval of consent agenda.
Carlson, second.
Motions have been made and seconded, assuming there's no further discussion. Madam City Clerk?
Watson Curry,
Yes.
Dahlquist,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Durand,
Yes.
Seljavold,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Hendrickson,
Yes.
Lindos.
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes. Move on to item number 5, approval of the minutes from the May 26th, 2020 meeting. Any additions, corrections, or edits to those minutes?
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilmember Carlson. I have one correction on page 4 of the meeting minutes. John Ruhr's name is misspelled. It's supposed to be R-I-E-W-E-R, so I would just move to approve the minutes with that correction.
Motion made by Councilmember Carlson. Is there a second?
Seldvold, second.
Okay. Any further comments? Hearing none. Madam City Clerk?
Dahlquist, Dahlquist,
Yes.
Watson Curry,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Durand,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Seljavold,
Yes.
Hendrickson,
Yes.
Lindos. Lindos.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 6, citizens addressing the council. Madam City Manager, Madam City Clerk, have we received any communications electronically or otherwise regarding any citizens that wish to be heard at this time? No? Okay. Hearing none, then we'll move on to item number 8. It is 5:44, but I think by the time I'm finished reading, it'll be 5:45. Public hearing regarding the request of Dan Perro on behalf of ISR Homes LLC for property tax exemption for a project located at 4218 29th Avenue South. And I'll entertain a motion to go into a public hearing.
Watson Curry, so moved.
Deb White, second.
Councilmember White with the second. Madam Clerk?
Dahlquist,
Yes.
Watson Curry,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Durand,
Yes.
Lindos,
Yes.
Hendrickson,
Yes.
Seljavold.
Yes.
Motion passes. We are now in public hearing. Mr. Lapointe, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and hello, council members. Yes, tonight, as the mayor introduced, we have a new project. This is a project that's in our industrial park, the Makara Industrial Park, right along the interstate. You may have recalled this project. We introduced it a number of months back, actually in the wintertime, when we were looking at the selling of the city-owned land for this project. Again, this is on behalf of Dan Perro, which I believe Dan has called in and is on the line for questions. If not, I'll be able to try to answer them. This is the construction of his corporate headquarters for his company called ISR Homes. It's a home building company. They're looking to build approximately 12,000 square feet of office and warehouse for their company. They have a number of employees that will be retained and made available at this space. This is something that Dan's been wanting to do for a number of years, and homegrown kind of Moorhead company, and we're excited to see him expand into our community. This is a part of our commercial industrial property tax exemption, so you may recall that we have a couple segments for this. It's a 3-year or 5-year term based on the new taxable value that's put into the project. The existing land value is taxable, which is approximately $190,000. Again, this is vacant land that was out there for a long time, a number of years. And this project, the new estimated building value is about $1.1 million. So a good project. You can see on the images that we have up on the screen, it's a high quality project. It's going to look great from the interstate. And this $1.1 million new investment to the new taxable value that's being estimated equates to a 5-year property tax exemption. This parcel is zoned light industrial, and he does meet all the standards of that. It also is a part of our gateway overlay standards, which basically means there's some site visibility standards that are in addition to the normal zoning districts as you cross the interstate. If approved here tonight, construction would begin in June of 2020 with the estimated completion in November of 2020. Again, a great project, and we're thankful for Dan for expanding his company in Moorhead. Be happy to answer any questions you may have, and I know Dan's on the line if you have any questions as well.
Thank you, Mr. Lapointe, for that overview. I'm not sure if council has any questions for Derek or not, or if Mr. Perro, you wish to be heard on this as well. Oh, wait, I do see Councilmember Carlson has a question. Councilmember Carlson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was a combination of Perro and Mayor. Mr. Perro, I was just curious on what type of businesses you would be seeking or reaching out to or anticipating would be, you would be looking at to lease the condo area?
Yeah, and if Mr. Perro is on the line, I think he might be best suited to answer that question.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep, sure can.
Okay. I actually have a number of our contractors that we use have reached out to us. So 2 of them currently right now have indicated that they will lease space from us. We are pretty strict and stringent on what they are going to be doing in the building or the lease space. We want to keep it a nice, clean look and professional look because it is along the interstate. So I am, pretty stringent on what they're will be doing and parking, things like that.
Thank you, Mr. Perro. Councilmember Carlson, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Perro.
Not a problem. Any other council members have any questions for Mr. Lapointe and Mr. Perro? Mr. Perro, is there anything else you wanted to add on behalf of your project?
I just say that, Fargo, Moorhead, primarily Moorhead, has been my home for over 20 years. And the city, the council is investing into this project. We're investing into Moorhead, and the rapid growth that we're seeing in the last 18 months to 2 years, we could see 100+ homes a year in a short amount of time here. So this will give us an opportunity to expand our business and give the quality customer service that we're seeking and our homeowners are needing, and then just be more efficient.
Thank you, Mr. Perrell. We do appreciate having you here in our city, and also your willingness to invest in our city, so it's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there aren't any other council members or staff that have anything to add, I will entertain a motion to take us out of the public hearing.
Seldrold, so moved.
Watson Curry, second.
Motion's been made and seconded. I'm assuming no further discussion. Madam City Clerk?
Dahlquist, Dahlquist, Watson Curry,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Durand, Durand, White,
Yes.
Seljavold,
Yes.
Hendrickson,
Yes.
Lindas.
Yes.
Let the record reflect, I did see Councilmember Durand mouth yes. We were having audio problems, so it is a unanimous vote. Motion passes. Then we'll move on to 8A, which is a resolution to approve a property tax exemption for ISR Homes, Inc., corporate headquarters located at 4218 29th Avenue South, with a parcel number of 58.418.0030. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Second,
Watson
Chuck.
Curry.
You get it, Madam City Clerk?
Yes.
All right.
Dahlquist,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Watson Curry,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Durand, Durand,
Let the record reflect, Councilmember Durand is not head nodding yes and saying yes.
Lindas,
Yes.
Hendrickson,
Yes.
Seljavold.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Perro. Okay, then we'll move on to item number 9, various actions related to the wastewater interim improvements project, engineering number 18-06-04A, B, and 19-06-01. Dr. Bob Zimmerman, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Judd. Council members, we have a brief PowerPoint to describe this action. You might recall we've had various conversations about this project dating back to, I think, the latter part of 2017 and a few updates in between. The last city council action was January. The council authorized an advertisement for bids, and we received those bids in mid-May, and the second slide of the presentation here is just a summary of the improvements that are included in this overall project. 3 of those improvements at the wastewater treatment facility itself, the first 3 listed there, the bar screens, the digester membrane cover, and the emergency equipment storage facility. Sanitary lift station number 14 on the north side of town serves about 1/3 of the city. And then the brick sewer that we've talked about in the downtown area, that serves about actually half of the city. All of those projects, equipment essentially at the end of their useful life, and certain risks involved with not upgrading those facilities. So as I'd mentioned we received bids in mid-May. This table on page 3 is a comparison of the numbers that were proposed in the facility plan or preliminary engineering study for this project. Total of about $19 million. The bids that we received are shown in the second column. We've received bids for the first 3 rows there, so that's the wastewater treatment facility improvements, the sanitary lift station, and a couple of phases of brick sewer. We have not bid phase 2 and 3 of brick sewer, so that number is to be determined. That'll be bid next year and or the year after. I think the important point of this slide is based on what we have received bids for. We're currently about $1 million below the estimate that was used in the facility plan. The funding plan, as you might recall for this, is to utilize a special loan fund that's established for wastewater projects called the Clean Water Revolving Fund Loan. This is administered by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and the Public Facilities Authority. In this case, the loan payments are repaid through the wastewater treatment fund, meaning they're repaid through wastewater service charges. The advantage of this program, it was established to provide affordable financing, and generally speaking, the interest rates are about 1.5% below a bond rate. Number of procedural requirements here, and without going through the detailed list, you'll note that we've been through now all of those over the course of the past year or two, getting down to the final 2, which would be to submit these bid numbers to the PFA that would allow the city to proceed to close on a loan this summer. And then tonight to award bids and allow construction to proceed with those projects. The graph on slide 5 is actually the graph that we used for the public hearing for this project. At that time, again, we were estimating total project cost of $19 million. At that time, we were using an interest rate of about 2.9%. We've since learned that the interest rate is likely going to be just something over 1%, but in our analysis, to be conservative, we're still using 1.5. This was the exact slide from the public hearing a little over a year ago. So this was 19 million at 2.9%. And just to remind you what's shown, the bars in this graph are the wastewater treatment fund reserve balance. So at the beginning of 2020, roughly $7 million. We're using that reserve balance to phase in rate increases to account for this new debt service. So it's a combination of phasing in rates as well as expiring debt service within this fund. So you'll note that we do draw down those reserves. We planned to draw down those reserves a bit and phase in increases, which are shown on the blue line. The blue line is referenced to the right axis, which is percent increase. The numbers that are, the black numbers that are tagged to the blue line are actual monthly change in utility bills for the average residential customer. So for example, in 2020, we had a 5% rate increase, average change $1.51 per month for a residential customer. Now these are the old numbers. We've since updated these in a couple of scenarios. The first one is just simply based on a recognition that we're about $1 million under the original budget, and the interest rate is going to be lower than we had originally assumed. Taking those two things into account, in this scenario, we just scaled back all of the future rate increases to the minimum they could be to roughly mimic the reserve balances over that same period of time. So we'll summarize all of these rate impacts in a table, so it might be a little bit easier to read. We did do one more scenario And this was sort of a sensitivity test on what flexibility there might be in budgeting for 2021. So the assumption in this flexibility, or this sensitivity test, was a 0% rate increase for next year. What would we need to do in the years following? And if you compare the two, you'll note that in this revised scenario 1, we'd be looking at a recommendation of 3% followed by 2% for the remaining years. If you go to this scenario 2 and do a 0% next year, then you're going to need to do some 3% following that. But all those are relatively 2 or 3% relatively reasonable given the scope of this project. Again, we're not making any recommendation tonight on what those rate increases need to be. That's a discussion for the City Council during the budget process, and we can provide additional scenarios and more scenarios, whatever the council would like to see. The purpose of this was simply to give you a level of comfort with moving forward with this project that doesn't commit the council to anything necessarily for 2021. So these are, on slide 8, these are those same rate increases in a table format, just so you can compare them side by side. The first column being our original facility plan estimate, and the last 2 columns being those updates. And the percent increases the differences are shown in blue. So, for example, in 2021, where we'd originally proposed 4, we could use a 3, or we could even go to a 0. In 2022, we had originally proposed 3. You could easily go to 2 now, and if you do go to that 0, you might have to go to 3 that year. So there's a lot of flexibility in how these are managed. The good news is there is no 10% rate increase, no 7 or 8% rate increase. These are relatively manageable numbers. The bottom of that shows the average monthly charge at the end of that period, so that's 2028. Using any of those rate increases, the average residential charge of about $38, so $1 and some change per day for full wastewater services per month. And then the reserve balances. And again, the reserve balances are all above the minimum required. What we've assumed here is that by the end of 2028, you would want to be back to where we are now, just planning for whatever future improvements might be needed, whatever new permit requirements may come along, for example, phosphorus limits or something like that. Totally at the discretion of the council how those reserves go forward, and we can provide numerous scenarios during budget discussions. So this is our schedule, at least recent events. We're here in June, proposal before the council to award bids for those improvements. We'd start construction. Those improvements would be completed, some this year, some the fall of 2021, and then we still have those 2 future phases of brick sewer that we would do. So along with that, there's a number of council actions recommended tonight. The first 3 of those to award the bids for those projects. The next 3 are task orders for construction administration, proposing to hire the design engineers to perform that construction administration. And then the last one, there is a temporary construction easement needed in the Regal Estates Park, the manufactured home park, and we've negotiated with that property owner, have an agreement for that, and so that would authorize that temporary construction easement. And with that, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Dr. Zimmerman. I believe we have 1, 2, whoa, everybody. Okay, let me see here, 1 second here. Let me get it in order, which I saw the hands come up, so please just give me a moment. Okay. So we'll begin with Councilmember Dahlquist, then Councilmember Lindos, then Councilmember White, then Councilmember Watson Curry. So we'll begin with Councilmember Dahlquist first.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. I really appreciate all the numbers. I think I would prefer trying to keep our rates steady. And also my questions on the moving of the homes in Regal Estates, I read there is a way to get reimbursed for the moving costs. I'm just wondering if the people that have to move their homes have been informed about that, about the refunding?
Yes, they have. We've been working with the three and have coordinated the new locations they're moving to, and we will be providing them with that reimbursement actually upfront before they have to make the move so that they have the resources to do it.
Thank you so much.
Councilmember Lindos?
Thank you, Mayor Judd. Dr. Zimmerman, that was partly my question also in terms of the communication to individuals that we're having to move, and hopefully everyone is not upset about that. And then could you remind me on the digester covers, did we already replaced one digester cover? Was that the primary? And this is the secondary?
So this, no, we have not replaced one recently. Well, recently to me is a couple decades, but I think about 10 years ago we did replace primary digester covers. This one.
Thought we had.
Go ahead.
I thought we had actually authorized a digester cover replacement.
No, that's this one tonight.
Okay. So I got ahead. That's probably why I couldn't find it then. Then this mainly has to do with when we're considering the loans and stuff, and it's just a placeholder. I would love to see some of the, when we're talking about the different loan capacities that the city has and part of our budgeting process, to be able to see some graphs about all the different projects and what the impact they have on the total loan capacity of the city. And so that's not necessarily something we're questioning tonight, but I just moving forward. And then I think I'm done.
No worries. Thank you, Councilmember Lindos. Councilmember White.
Well, my question was also related to the residents who have to move. You answered it in part, and my other addition to that would just be I was wondering, Dr. Zimmerman, did the residents who have to move, do they have a choice over where the new location will be, where their homes are being moved to? I'm assuming it's like a lot of places where they don't own the land, but they may own the mobile home. So I just wanted to make sure that they're moving to a place that they feel comfortable with.
Yes, there were a number of options actually available within the park, and they all were able to choose the location that they preferred to go to. And luckily we were able to facilitate that, and everyone is agreeable to those moves.
Does that answer your question, Councilmember White? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Councilmember Watson Curry.
My question was addressed. We can move on.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Dahlquist, your hand is still up unless there's a new question.
I'm done. Sorry, I'll take it down.
No, that's okay. I just want to make sure I didn't leave anybody out. Any other questions from anyone? I think I highlighted, let me look through my agenda here. I just want to make sure, because I did have a question, but it might not be until another item for resolution. This is not as a part of the storage facility.
That's part of this, yes.
Okay. That's an A, okay. So you probably knew that this was coming because I had a question about it last time. You know, we got budget restraints, and you know, I get it. With this additional item, that's added, Dr. Z, and I gotta ask you about it. I know I think it looks like it's emergency equipment storage facility replacement. And it's looking at, replacing storage for portable generators, pumps, other emergency equipment, removed with Cullen Hockey Center expansion. Council, just the note, I think with my PDF readers, like page 130, page 30 of 165 is where I got it highlighted with the emergency equipment storage facility replacement. And just some backgrounds, just for folks that didn't know. So when the Cullen Hockey Center expanded, there was a facility there on site that stored some equipment to protect it from the elements. That got lost because of the expansion. So my understanding is we do not have a facility of that nature right now?
We are using a flood buyout property that's scheduled for demolition.
Okay.
And then we purchased some containerized storage for short-term, but nothing long-term.
Okay. So that would add an additional $1 million or 1.1. I got it highlighted somewhere here, but it would add an additional 1-point-some odd million to the project. I know you wouldn't have put it in there if we didn't need it. But with that being said, what in essence would be the items that would go in here? And I guess if we're trying to protect our investment, how important would this facility be to protecting those items that would save us money in the future?
So the most important equipment that will go in this facility are, as you mentioned, portable generators, portable pumps. So those are pieces of equipment that we use in the event of a power outage or, for example, maybe a very severe rainstorm event where our sanitary sewer system becomes inundated by rainwater. So in those cases, if we lose power, we can mobilize these generators if they're in a condition where they can be pulled out and immediately put to use, right? So in a storage facility, if we store them outside and for example, freezing conditions or something, they're not going to be ready for use. Generally the city's got great reliable power, but if there's a massive storm of some reason, I've seen these happen, where we've mobilized all of that equipment. And so the real risk here is hard to tag a dollar number to. The real risk is if you get that big event and you don't have any equipment to mobilize, then the impacts and the damage from that will be greater. So to give you an exact benefit cost ratio for that, that's a difficult thing to do, but that is the risk of not having a home for this. We've accumulated this equipment over time. A lot of it was at the Cullen Hockey Arena, but we had some other stuff spread out in a couple of other locations. And this has been something on our list of needs for a long time, and we've sort of just limped along, and then the loss of what we did have over in the Cullen area really kind of tipped us over the edge.
And with this unit, it would be centrally located with where it technically should be?
It'll be where it should be so that the staff that need access to that equipment have immediate access to it. The other benefit of locating it at the wastewater plant is we can tie into the existing heating system. We don't need a whole new heating system. And we're not going to heat this to 70 degrees, but enough heat to keep the equipment functional. And so we're able to tag that onto the existing system. So that's a benefit that reduces the overall cost of that facility as opposed to going somewhere else and building from scratch. So it'll be more efficient, more cost effective, and quite frankly, with a little over 1% loan, that's about as good as we're going to do, I think.
Okay. So hypothetically speaking, let's say, for example, if this wasn't included as a part of the project and they were left outside in the elements and they didn't work, if we had a catastrophic plan, is there a backup plan that we would be able to get this equipment and get it operational at a short term?
Best you could do would be rent it. And you'd probably be days before you actually receive rentals of those kinds of equipment. Some generators you probably can get within a day, but you're probably talking days when you want to be reacting in hours.
Okay, well, that's fair. No, thank you for that, Dr. Z. To the council, I just brought that up because the last time we brought this up, I was a little weary about the cost of it. And since we've been in budget discussions, I just thought it would be prudent to bring that up. I don't know if that raises any questions for anyone. I do see Councilmember Carlson with her hand up, so Councilmember Carlson, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dr. Zimmerman, just because, you know, we are going to be facing some budget issues this year due to the COVID, I did have kind of a hypothetical. You'd mentioned that you're currently using some flood buyout buildings for storing this. What would be the cost comparison if you moved the facilities or the whatever you're using right now, if you move them to the location that you have designated for it, what would that cost be versus building, and would it last very long? Would you see any cost benefit in doing that? If you could talk about that a little bit, that would be great.
Sure. The facilities we're using now were sort of makeshift. They were structures added onto structures that were used as a cabinet making shop, I believe, and for some storage. Quite frankly, I'm not even sure they could be moved. And they're not in a condition that would last for a very long period of time.
That answer your question, Councilmember?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Dr. Zimmerman.
Councilmember Hendrickson has his hand up. We'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I asked this last time, Bob, but with that digestive flexible membrane, the reuse that, you know, the capture of the methane gas, what would that be used for? Or is it possible, or what's the story on that?
You did, and it's a great question. I'll be happy to answer it again. That cover allows us to capture methane gas that currently, and we have for many years, burned in boilers to reduce consumption and purchase of natural gas. So that is considered a green function. Beyond that, and something that we will be looking at in the future, is the use of that gas in what's called combined heat and power. So you use that to generate power, and a byproduct of the power is heat. So we get two purposes for one. The challenge we've had with that is the technology is just not quite there. The price for the technology is just not quite there to make it cost effective. But I would guess within the next few years, you will likely see that technology improve to the point where we can do combined heat and power, which will be a real benefit and a budget benefit at that point. So that cover allows us to do what we do now, plus will assist in the future.
And that's good too, because it's environmental friendly and, you know, saves us money with the heat and power. So thank you very much, sir.
You bet.
Any other questions by council? Councilmember Carlson, you have your hand up. I'm not sure if that's an old hand or a new hand. Old hand.
Old hand, sorry.
No, that's all good. No worries. Anything else to add, Dr. Z? No? Okay. Any other comments? All right, so, Mr. City Attorney, you need to go through these one at a time or as a whole?
It is entirely up to the maker of the motion and the seconder. You could take them all at once, or you could approve them individually.
So I'll leave it up to council member who may wish to take all of these all at once or individually.
I'll make a motion to take them all at once in one motion.
So, go second.
We have a motion, Councilmember Hendrickson, Councilmember Soldier with the second. Any further discussion before we move forward? Madam City Clerk?
Lindos,
Yes.
Hendrickson, Hendrickson,
Yes.
Seljavold,
Yes.
White, Durand,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Watson Curry,
Yes.
Dahlquist.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you, Dr. Z. Thank you, everyone. I think that'll take us down to item number 13, which is a resolution to approve a purchase agreement at 2524 40th Avenue South.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to introduce it, and then I'm going to ask Christy Leszewski to come up and explain it. This is a property that the council did discuss a possible sale of in executive session on May 26. It is a property located adjacent to, directly east of Southside Regional Park. Christy will explain the project, but it's important for me to note that the developer did offer full listing price for the sale of this for the purchase of this property. So we are selling it at full price. He will also be assuming all the special assessments of $612,000. The full price sale is $400,000. So 400 plus the 612. We are distributing the funds based on our policy 75-25%, with just a little bit of a deviation because we've already got a park adjacent to it. We don't need those park funds directly to go to that. So there's a little bit of an adjustment to that, but essentially it's 75-25, and we're very pleased with this potential development. With that, I'll ask Christy to go over the details.
Thanks, Chris. Just a few additional comments for the mayor and council. You may remember that this particular project is anticipated to be completed in phases. Phase 1, they anticipate starting on the north side of the site, closer to the Parkview neighborhood. One of the comments that the council had during executive session was that the developer consider some outreach to the neighborhood. We passed that along, and he is looking at options to do that. Another one of the comments that I believe you made, Mr. Mayor, was just so they're aware of some of the activities at the park, the long-term master plan. So we shared that with him as well as connected him with Holly Hyde Camp at the Parks Department so they could talk a little bit more. The phases are going to be based on market demand. Right now they're looking at single family towards the north, again, really being that harmonious continuation of the Parkview neighborhood, with some potential townhomes and small apartments on the south side of the site, but again, that would be based on market demand, and I believe they are doing a study on that right now. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Leszewski. Councilmember Hendrickson has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering, with Public Works, did they find a different site for that recycle lot there?
They're still reviewing sites, but likely will be just to the south of 40th Avenue, so not too far from this site, potentially looking at a location right next to where the new water tower is planned to be. But again, still reviewing options, but that is looking like a possibility.
So that site will remain there, correct? I mean, not in that same place, but in the same area.
They are looking at an area that is close to where it is now, correct?
Okay, and I live over by that area, and I know that lot gets used quite a bit, so I'm happy to hear that. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Okay. Seeing none, hearing none, is there a motion to approve the resolution?
Lindos moves.
Well,
or I'll take a second.
I was going to say I saw Councilmember Lindos first because I think that's how it reacts. So then I'm not sure. I'm not sure who came after that though.
It's both fourth ward, so I'll be second.
Fair enough. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Madam City Clerk, do your thing.
Dahlquist,
Yes.
Watson Curry,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Durand,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Seljevold,
Yes.
Hendrickson,
Yes.
Lindos.
Yes.
Motion passes. All right, so move on to item number 15, which is a resolution to authorize filing of an application with the Federal Transit Administration for CARES Act Transit Operating and Capital Assistance.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, we do have Lori Van Beek, Transit Manager, on the phone. I think we'll let Lori explain this. Lori, are you there?
I'm there. Can you hear me?
We can. Go for it.
Great. Thank you. So the City of Moorhead, as a federal grantee for transit, has received an appropriation of $2.5 million in CARES Act funds to prevent, prepare, and respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And eligible expenses include operating costs and preventive maintenance costs effective January 20th of 2020, and also some capital costs at 100%. And those funds do not have an expiration date. So we have incurred some COVID-19 specific expenses as we've implemented changes to transit to address the pandemic. You know, and I've listed those there on your communication. One of the things we have done is suspend collection of fares. We did that March 23rd, and that was to allow for rear entry of the buses for people boarding the buses to protect the drivers from being in contact and to help with the social distancing. And we are looking to, you know, continue that possibly through September 30th of 2020 to allow people as they get introduced back into the workforce to have to not have to worry about paying that fare for a period of time to help them with their expenses and things in response to that. And so we're doing other things. You know, we've got personal protective equipment, including a plexiglass barrier that is movable, that blocks the front entrance, but can be opened up when we need to use the front entrance ramp for people with disabilities to get on the bus system. We're doing increased cleaning and sanitizing of buses. And we've added some additional bus service to our busiest shopping route to help with social distancing because of the fact that we just had overcrowding on that bus route 4 that serves the Target, Walmart, Cashwise area. So what this means to us is this, $2.5 million. We have already in place a state grant for 2020 and 2021. And the state of Minnesota has said that we should use our CARES Act funds to match that grant. So that means that that frees up our local match funds that we would normally put to match those grants, including, you know, our property tax funds that we put into transit. In 2020, we have budgeted about $150,000 in property tax funds, but we also have budgeted an amount for fare box revenue, and that amount of fare box revenue will be down because of the free rides. But COVID-19 does cover all of those expenses 100% of net. So once we've subtracted what we've collected for fare boxes, the rest of it is 100% eligible for CARES Act money. So our annual match to all of our state grants is about $500,000, and we have $2.5 million. So the majority of the grant application that I'm asking for approval to submit would be to provide that money towards operating and preventive maintenance costs for the transit system, and a very small amount for a capital project. So that $500,000 a year in local share match, we continue to match state grants, could last us up to 5 years before we have to find additional or put back into the system costs some property tax funds. I say up to 5 years because there are, the state of Minnesota is saying that their state money probably will be reduced because of COVID-19 and the revenues and the effects on the economy. So they expect in 2022 and 2023, during that grant period, that there could be a decrease of approximately 25% in state funding, which we would again have to pick up then with other federal money or CARES Act money. The capital project that I'm proposing at this time is about $66,000, and it is to put a permanent barrier up next to the bus drivers in each of our 12 large fixed route buses to replace the temporary ones that we have there now. That protection will allow the drivers to have a window that they can open, talk to passengers, and deal with the fare boxes and such, but closed to protect them as people are boarding so that they can stay safe away from germs and other acts from the passengers. So there's a good long-term benefit for that. There are some additional transit costs that may be incurred in future years that again would use some of this CARES Act money as well. We are in the process of negotiating the college UPass fees for the 2020-21 academic year, and assuming that they will see some of that benefit from the CARES Act money because we have suspended fares for a period of time. Also, the transit routes that we run through the Dilworth area would also be eligible for CARES Act funds to cover the local share match for them so that they don't, that frees up their local dollars as well. And then just, going after bids for driver services and things like that. I know on the council's list and in the 5-year transit development plan, there was a high priority for adding Sunday service. That isn't something that we are looking at this moment, but it is something we could use CARES Act money for to pilot. Once we've piloted new services, then it becomes eligible for state funding. So that is an ability for us to cover 100% costs and see how that pilot would work should Fargo and Moorhead decide to do Sunday service on the fixed route system. So the impacts of COVID-19 are some additional expenses. I'm projecting about $75,000 in costs through June, and there may be more as we move forward until we've loosened up some of the requirements for social distancing and people return to our normal operating system, getting on the buses and riding to work and paying fares again. And the finance director has indicated that we should do a budget adjustment towards the end of 2020 as we have a better idea as to what all of those costs and revenues are. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Van Beek. Greatly appreciate your report. I'm going to take we do have a couple council members here who have their hands up. I'm going to start with the Councilmember White, the Councilmember Hendrickson, the Councilmember Lindas. So Councilmember White, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Lori. I have a couple of comments. One regarding the elimination of the fare fee through September 30th. And if possible, I would say because I think that, we're still going to be getting back on our feet, the pandemic will still be with us. And if it was possible to extend it even longer, I think there would be real benefit to that. As you mentioned, it helps people that are, getting back there, back in the job market, being able to get access to jobs, but also for economic development. And I don't know if you've looked at, even before the COVID crisis, Kansas City, their transit authority was looking at getting rid of their fare just because they did some estimates showing that if people just instead use the public transportation to go downtown and spend at their local businesses, that it would benefit the economy more than what they were getting from the revenue from the fare. So I know that we would lose some of that money, but I see a real benefit to workers and to our businesses. And then in regard to the Sunday service too, I would definitely be in favor of us piloting that if we could use some of the CARES Act money for that. And again, I think, the situation right now is if you rely on public transportation, then you can't work on Sundays, that for some people that really limits the jobs that they're able to get access to. And so if we could use that, I think it would be a great opportunity, because I know there's been discussion for a while about the desire to get a Sunday, some Sunday routes going. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember White.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, sorry, Ms. Femby, go right ahead.
I was just gonna say that, yeah, we could extend the fare for a longer period of time if the council desires to do that. We are trying to coordinate that with the city of Fargo, and we would just, ask them if they would be willing to as well, since many of our fares are paid by passes that are used on both Fargo and Moorhead system, but that would be definitely something we could bring to their attention.
Councilmember Hendrickson, you had your hand up. It's now down. Did you still wish to be heard?
No, I was going to ask the question, if they're going to coordinate with Fargo, but Lori just answered it, so thank you.
No problem. Councilmember Lindas?
Yes, thank you, Lori. I'm going to echo what Councilmember White also said, but also the only question, you basically answered operational cost changes and infrastructure and being able to plan and have some flexibility for the future. The one question I did have is connectivity between Fargo and Moorhead. Could you comment on kind of how, there's been changes in that, what your plans are moving forward?
Okay, so the connectivity during the recent protests, is that what you're referring to?
That, yeah, just kind of, in terms of COVID, what we're planning.
Okay, well, Fargo and Moorhead have a downtown ground transportation center. It's owned by the city of Fargo, and that is our transfer point for people to move between the two communities and get from a Moorhead bus onto a Fargo bus as part of the MAP bus system. The ground transportation center is currently under construction. And so we have vacated that building during construction and moved to a building just a few blocks down the street at 401 3rd Avenue North, which is the previous public health building for Fargo. We are continuing to operate out of there, and transfers are still occurring between Fargo and Moorhead buses. But during the COVID-19, we have not opened up the lobby area to protect it. And because we're not selling fares, there's not a lot of need to open that area. We expect to be able to move back into our ground transportation center at the end of August. That's what the construction is showing at this time. During the recent protest, we did make some adjustments because we did not want to be operating in downtown Fargo for the safety of our drivers and passengers. And we set up a temporary transfer point at the Moorhead Center Mall on the north side where the Lincoln Gun Shelter used to be. We did that on Friday and on Saturday this previous week. And then we connected with Fargo on a route that ran from the Marriott Transfer Hub out to West Acres. And we had approximately 500 riders on that connecting route, which we thought was pretty good for 2 days. And we were interested in seeing what people thought of that southern connection as we look towards our 5-year transit development plan and potential changes this next year. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and could you maybe expand? I recognize that all the plans for the downtown transfer station were put in place pre-COVID, but people have been trying to figure out infrastructural changes to help with social distancing and basically protecting workers and also riders in this case. Are you trying to kind of build into the existing remodel some structure, little changes?
We do have a separate area for our dispatchers to be able to see the buses and to deal with passengers selling different products and things that is completely protective around them so that they are protected from people and have an access tray to pay fares and talk to people. And then there's an administrative section of the ground transportation center where some of the offices that are now at our Metro Transit garage will be moving down there for administering the transit system. And they are going to have our paratransit reservationists locate there along with our dispatchers. And so there will be more places where you can purchase fares and in areas that are open to the public but yet are protected as far as plexiglass and things like that. So yes, and the waiting room areas are actually going to be a little bit smaller, I would say, at the new facility But the restrooms are greatly improved, where they're kind of like at an airport where you don't have to go in and out of doors. You can just walk through like a turn area and avoid having to touch so many surfaces and things like that. So there's some improvements there. And Jefferson Lines is also still going to be at the new remodeled Ground Transportation Center. They provided some of the funding through a grant that they received for updating their area. So they have a sales counter and things, and have been talking to us about maybe coordinating some of those sales of tickets and things with our staff.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Are there any other questions or comments for Ms. Van Beek? Then, Councilmember Watson Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Lori. I just wanted to extend our gratitude to the drivers for their work through all this. I also really appreciate how Matt Best has stepped up to utilize the infrastructure they have to support people in these challenging times, whether it's delivering Meals on Wheels or just really appreciate the driver's flexibility in this challenging time. And Lori, I want to commend you for the earmarking the funds for materials that focuses on providing safety for our drivers, as they're the most critical asset in there. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Watson Curry, for that acknowledgement. Any other comments or questions for Ms. Van Beek? Hearing, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution as written.
Lindas moves approval of motion.
White seconds.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Madam City Clerk?
Dahlquist,
Yes.
Watson Curry,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Durand,
Yes.
Seljevold,
Yes.
Lindas,
Yes.
Hendrickson.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Ms. Van Beek, for all of your work on this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, folks, that gets us to item number 17 on the agenda, which is an adoption of a resolution relating to an engagement letter with Baker Tilly Virchow Kraus LLP. Baker Tilly and temporarily appointing, flip the page, the assistant city manager as the acting city manager until such time as the interim city manager is appointed by the city council. So everyone, I'm sure, has had the opportunity to read the engagement letter and the information that is listed in our agenda this evening. And I'm going to apologize in advance because I have talked with City Attorney Shockley about this matter. And after I've had an opportunity to review this and also get my mind back after the weekend, and also pursuant to our discussion regarding the budget last week, I would like to bring to the council something a little bit different. I'd like to have the council consider the following, and I'll scroll down to the applicable page when I get there. So in essence this, I think in looking at the fact that if we were to hire this firm, in light of the budget considerations, and I'm looking at page, on my PDF reader, 162 of 165, first paragraph, looks like we would pay Baker Tilly $23,500 for a flat fee to do this search. And I think consensus, we're looking at the potential of doing either a regional-based search. And then looking at what we also would be paying for, because the city would also have to pay for on-site travel expenses for candidates. Also have to potentially pay for additional items should we want to do a employee community survey. And I think, in my understanding, there are some community members that wish to be a part of the search process as well. There's an additional fee of $1,650. So my thought that I would like to have the council propose is the consideration of whether or not the council would be willing to look at this position internally first. And as the council, we would be, therefore, we would serve as the search committee for an internal search and make it and open it up to our city staff. And if we did not find a qualified person within our own walls, then we could come back and open up the search for a regional or / national based search. I think it may save us some time, it may save us some costs, and I think we would have to open it up for dialogue to the council. If that is a good idea, then next, while we're doing this search, would we want to hire an interim or have the assistant city manager serve as the city manager during this process, which I will ask for Attorney Shockley's input on that. So I'm tossing that out in light of the budget considerations. I think if there's a way that we can save some costs in this matter and find a qualified candidate internally, that would maybe the best way to proceed. But I'm also, obviously, we all have a say as far as how this process goes. So with that, if you want to process it, take your time. I do see a hand up, Councilmember Dahlquist. If you wish to chime in, feel free.
Thank you, Mayor. I do like that idea. We do have so many fine people that work for the city of Moorhead. I would like to take a look at who we have and who would be interested and apply. Also, I agree with, because of what's going on, not flying candidates in. I think we should all still be cautious, and flying is one of the most scary things for me anyway, to think about having someone fly in for that. And so, yeah, I agree with your suggestion.
Thank you. And I saw Councilmember Carlson, then Lindas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am curious as to what City Attorney Shockley has to say about the appointing of an acting and an interim. If he could speak to that first, and then I probably would like to comment after that.
City Attorney Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. So first of all, as you're probably very familiar, under the charter, the city manager is the council's only employee. So in the case of appointing an acting city manager, that is certainly something that you could do. You'd want to put some sort of bookends around when that appointment starts and when it ends. With respect to an appointment of an interim city manager, sometimes historically the council has decided to appoint an interim city manager from outside of the city in order to add transparency to the search process. On a budget perspective, that does add costs because you're entering into a contract with a third party. There are a group of former city managers that are usually closer to retirement age or past retirement age, and they like to serve as temporary interim city managers until a full-time city manager can be found. Sometimes that's a preferred avenue because then it adds transparency to the city manager search process, in that you're not, if you're going to conduct a full-blown city manager search, if you designate somebody internally as the interim city manager, sometimes people can perceive that, applicants can perceive that as that's the favored choice, and that may adversely influence your search process. So this is one of those times that the city council, you have to follow the hiring laws. So if you wanted to hire internally, I would suggest that you would direct myself to work with HR and our labor attorney, and we'll put together a job description and a proposed process for opening up the position internally, and then how the interviews would be conducted. But it's really up to you as a council if how you want to proceed. I mean, it's one of the few times in which you have a lot of discretion on how the council wants to act, and this is it's an important decision. It does take 6 votes to hire a city manager, so I can certainly answer any questions, but this is really one of those times when you have a lot of discretion as a city council.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Mr. Mayor and rest of council, I guess my thoughts on this would be, I would be comfortable appointing Assistant City Manager Dan Molly as the acting city manager until we would get an interim city manager in place. And I realize that would add a little bit of cost, but it's not going to be the substantial cost that is in front of us tonight. But I do like having the transparency if we are doing an internal search, considering that Mr. Molly may be interested in applying for this position. I think that it does add just that transparency that there's somebody else at the helm to give everybody that equal playing field. So that would be my thoughts, and I would direct City Attorney Shockley and our HR to develop a process for an internal candidate search.
Thank you, Councilmember Carlson. We'll move on to Councilmember Lindos, then Councilmember White, and then Councilmember Seljevold.
Thank you, Mayor Judd. I guess I can agree with Councilmember Carlson's statements. It's always challenging to hire a new city manager. These times that we find ourselves in just make that just a little bit more challenging. I guess there's 2 questions that I have, and that has to do with search committee composition. If there are ways to essentially have more diversity represented on a search committee from our community, so that we get a better input from different parts of our community. So that's 1. And 2, I guess developing a job description and stuff, it really comes from strategic priorities, and I don't feel like we've had a chance to revisit some of our strategic priorities, and in light of recent events, not just the pandemic, but tensions due to Floyd's death, there really seems to be an opportunity here to revisit and our strategic priorities. And then that could inform what we're going to actually put down as job description. So I guess those are my 2 thoughts.
So I guess Attorney Shockley, not sure if you wanted to comment. I mean, I'm not, I guess since technically speaking, the council would be a part of that search committee, how appropriate would it be to add, because as stated, there were some community members that reached out to me representing entities that would like to be a part of that process. What would that look like from our perspective?
Well, great question. It can take 2 paths. And without knowing which direction the council goes, I'll identify each one. So I'll use, if you went with an internal hiring process, we could have the council would ultimately be the decision maker in the hiring, but you could certainly have interviews structured where the applicant would meet with different community groups or a hiring committee that would be composed of different members of the community. Those sorts of issues, we can certainly come back with a plan on that if that's the council direction the council wants to go. If you go through the search route and hire a search firm, the search firm will help construct that hiring process. I believe when Chris was hired, there was a lot of, they had meetings with the staff, there was meetings with the community, and the search, yeah, and an open house. I've helped other clients where they've had, where they'll test the applicants on a press release. They'll give them a scenario where it's a crisis in the city and to draft a press release to see how they would perform in a press release. You can really structure it how you want to. It's your interview process, as long as we follow the bookends of what's permissible under labor law. So either way, we can structure that. I guess the biggest thing tonight would be, which road does the council want to take? Do they want to go down the internal hire process, or do you want to engage Baker Tilly for that external search?
Okay. Thank you, Attorney Shockley. Councilmember Lindos, does that generally answer your questions on that, or your thoughts on that?
Yeah, in terms of the first part, in terms of search committee composition possibilities, and then, you know, again, part of crafting a job description, the search committee can or should have some input in that too, I would think, within the parameters of the labor laws.
Attorney Shockley has some comments on that.
Oh, and my apologies for not referencing the job description. We do have a job description for the city manager, and the job description for the city manager is largely driven by the city charter. And then there are guidance documents throughout there's a professional group of city managers that helps to draft what that looks like. There's certain functions that a city manager has to perform by charter and just as a management perspective. And so you can have goals and objectives as part of the interview process and, you know, learning more about what you want in that process. But there is a job description that's already been created, and there's a lot of resources out there for kind of filling out what that job description looks like. But ultimately, at the end of the day, your relationship with the city manager will be driven by a contract with the city manager. And just like with most of our past historical city managers, we try to put in the agreement a process where there's a review process. There's also a process whereby the council and the city manager develop goals and objectives through the coming year.
Does that cover it, Councilmember Lindos?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember White, and then Councilmember Seljevold, and then I think, yep, Councilmember White and Seljevold.
Thank you, Mayor. I was wondering, because to me, there's three different things. One is would be the acting, and then and whether Baker Tilly would handle the search process for the interim, and then the eventual permanent city manager. And I'm wondering, since it looks like we're now considering something very different for the latter two, I wonder if we should put those two things off. Can we make a decision about the acting and then wait? Because I know I would just have some other questions too, like what is the cost saving? I do really appreciate if there's a way we could do this internally and save money in this time when we're some budget difficulties. I would appreciate that, but I also know even doing it internally, there's going to be costs involved. And are we fully prepared to do the work that it would entail for us to do it internally? So I'm not opposed to it, but I would definitely like a little more information. So I'm wondering, would it be best for tonight to sort of decide on whether or not our assistant city manager would be the acting city manager, and then maybe table the other part until our next meeting to decide if we want to do the interim and the full search externally or internally.
Up to you as a council.
Yeah, I'm open to all. I mean, I would assume, I mean, just by practical application, that if we did it, would it be more time on our plates? Absolutely. I would assume we would be fair and objective in following the labor laws. I would assume that we wouldn't have much travel costs. I would assume we would come in under 23,000 for sure, would be my initial guess, but it would just have to be up to us how we, you know, I guess, what resources we would utilize as far as time. Because obviously we're not going to pay anybody anything extra to do the work as we're already being paid by the charter. So I guess I'm open to discussion on that, I suppose. I'm open. I'm just throwing it out there. Apparently we're getting some consensus, but I'll marinate on that and pass it over to Councilmember Seljevold.
Well, Mr. Mayor, the way you framed it at the beginning, it seemed to me like you were, if it's a budget concern, I think it's a question of whether we do this or we hire an outside, and not whether we just have the internal candidates, and then if we're not satisfied, we're going to open to the outside. I think it's either we do it or somebody else does it, and you never know who you're going to get. So I think you need to compare what we have inside to people who might be interested in the job. So if it's a budget thing, it's either we do it or we just assign it and let somebody else do it. I don't think it should be, we're going to do an internal, and then if we're not satisfied, we look elsewhere. I think we need to do it all at once. There's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Councilmember Seljevold. I see, let's go Councilmember Hendrickson, then Watson Curry, and back to Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councilmember White. I think we should table, you know, the latter to and just have our assistant city managers become acting city manager right away. I got a question though. Do we have to go to an interim city manager? I might have missed that. I apologize.
No.
We don't. We don't have to. In my consultation with City Attorney Shockley, that's not, I mean, it's pretty much our call to make, how we wish to handle it. I think, again, not to go back to what Attorney Shockley stated earlier, but I think the primary consideration in looking at this is also, not primary, one of the primary considerations is the transparency aspect, whether or not there would be any concerns doing anything in the alternative. But no, the flat answer is no. You don't have to hire or bring in a interim, but that's our call to make.
Being one of the two people, I think Heidi well, I know Heidi went through this. We did go through this when we hired Chris, and you know, I'd be more in favor of just having the assistant city manager, Mr. Molly, take over acting city manager than go right into either an internal search or a regional search. And I'm kind of leaning towards the regional search because I think you have more options, but you know, I could think differently, in hard words, but you know, the interim manager is fine, but I don't think it's needed. With the, like Mr. Mayor, what you said, the budgetary, what we're going through with the budget, yeah, I'd just have Mr. Molly as assistant manager up until that internal or the regional search. But I do think Councilmember White had a good idea of just let's get the assistant manager as the acting city manager and then table the other two so we can just have a little bit more information handed to us, like how much is it going to save us? What are the pros and cons of going from internal, going to an external to a regional search? So that's where I'm at right now.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you for your words. Councilmember Watson Curry and then Councilmember Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I would just say I would also support taking action of appointing somebody in the acting role for continuity. My 2 cents as far as, I'm happy to table and talk about this more, but I do think the city of Moorhead's biggest strengths are our city staff and our strategic plan. I would be in favor of maybe a cross-section of an internal or at least regional. I don't think at this time, many cities are of course experiencing the effects of COVID-19, and I think it's really important you have someone at the helm who has a great understanding of where we are as a community regionally, and we have a great deal of momentum that's been a little bit paused now, but I think it's really important that whoever we hire has their finger on the pulse. And I would also say that I think that hiring committee piece is really important. I was also, I had not been sworn in as a council member, but did get to be a part of the interview process with City Manager Volkers, and watching some other roles in our city get filled. A position of chief of police comes to mind, that we did have a community panel involved in the hiring process, and I think it was Councilmember Linda who mentioned making sure that we have diversity there. And I love the idea of that kind of like press release or having some of those activities too. So we can talk more and get into the weeds about that later. Mayor, I think you said we don't need a raise for this, but I'm happy to support and work on this hiring to, in the essence of protecting some budget dollars. I'll close my mouth and mute my microphone now. Thank you.
No, you're all good. You're all good. Thank you, Councilmember Watson Curry. I think I've got Councilmember Carlson who's up next. So, and I think Councilmember White, your hand is still up. So I'll go back to you after Councilmember Carlson. Oh, now it's down. Okay. So Councilmember Carlson, we'll go back to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Shockley, do you have any idea of what the cost would be? And is this something that we would go through Baker Tilly to locate an interim city manager? Approximately, like what would the cost be for that? Is that something that we get assistance from the League of Minnesota Cities on? Could you talk a little bit about that process, because I'm more in favor of getting an interim city manager, and I would not be opposed to waiting until next council to determine if we just do internally or do an internal and external at the same time. But I also am in favor of just doing it ourselves and not hiring Baker Tilly. That's a lot of information. I hope you are able to surmise what I was asking.
So I can certainly answer that question. With respect to last time the city had hired an interim city manager, we did have a small expense. I think Baker Tilly, then Springstead, helped us with the search for an interim city manager. That was a truncated process, so I want to say it was maybe $2,000 to $3,000 for that process. The interim city manager is a contract position, and they charged per month, and I wanted to say it was about maybe $10,000 to $15,000 per month, maybe a little bit more. The city didn't pay any benefits for it, so it's like a contract with a professional, in that you're not paying any health benefits, you're not paying any retirement, but you are paying that contract provision. I believe they had to pay the Minnesota PERS as part of that. And then there was some small cost just having the labor attorney review the agreement. So, and naturally that contract, I mean, that's negotiable with the person that would be serving in that role. And that was based upon the number of hours. I believe that David, the reason that it was in that price range is David was working about 32 hours a week. It wasn't quite full-time, so it wasn't quite equivalent to a full-time city manager salary. But it really depends upon what you want in that position. And that would just be, you take that monthly cost times the number of months you would have an interim city manager. I think that answered the question.
Yeah, it did, Mr. Shockley, thank you. Is it a possibility to eliminate having Baker Tilly do a search, since he somewhat recently had an interim city manager prior to City Manager Volkers, and perhaps utilize the same interim manager who would have some insight into Moorhead already? Has that ever been done in the past? And is that something that we could look at possibly doing?
So I'd actually, one of the first things I did was to find out where David was, and I believe he is currently in a position right now. I can't remember the name of the city, maybe you recall.
A small city
Yeah,
somewhere.
Yeah, it's a small city, and he's tied up as a city manager, interim city manager for a while. So he would not be available for the position, at least right away. He'd probably, for the small amount of cost that would be involved in having Baker Tilly locate interim city manager, they do have a lot of the connections that I know I don't necessarily have the connections with those interim city managers. We could certainly put out the word with the LMC and see if they could generate any names of people who would be interested in the position. There'd be very little cost involved in that. That would just be to put an agreement together. But sometimes they have a list of people that are willing to serve as interim city managers. I could certainly check on that to see if LMC has a list readily available that we could look at.
I think that would be helpful, Mr. Shockley. And would you recommend that we decide on that step tonight, or wait until the next council meeting to decide on that step, in addition to, it would be an internal and external search and the scope?
Well, so I think on a timing perspective, it really, two things. I think at a basic level, you need to maintain some level of continuity and management. The current city manager needs to identify who's going to take the reins and in about 3 weeks. And so tonight, probably having just, identified an acting city manager is probably something that should be done. With respect to determining whether or not you want an interim city manager and the hiring process, that's something you could probably defer to another meeting if you wanted some time to think about it. But I would recommend that tonight you would make a decision to appoint somebody as the acting city manager effective on Chris's last date, so that there's a continuity in management at the city.
Then answer your questions or comments. Councilmember Carlson?
Yes, it did, thank you.
It will go to Councilmember Lindos, then Dahlquist, then Seljevold.
Okay, so I'm in favor of appointing a city manager and Molly as our acting, because we know and we can put that person in place. But moving forward, I think we need an interim city manager. It looks to me, I'm just doing rough scribbles on a piece of paper, but it could be budget neutral in terms of having an outside agency if the League of Minnesota Cities doesn't have a ready list of possible interim managers to engage an outside firm to actually find us an interim manager that we can then put in place, so we have a little bit a clearer, more transparent process. And I think that what I'm in favor of is acting to a point right now and then actually direct people to start looking into that interim so that we can make actually a decision on interim by next time, because we're rapidly approaching the end of June. And so we need to make some decisions. And I also am keenly aware, although I'm in favor of saving money, I don't want to be pound wise what's the saying? No, it's pound wise, penny foolish, no, or something like that. Anyways, no, it's the other way around. That's what it is. So I'm keenly aware that I do not want to save a little bit of money, which then is going to have a bad effect for the city down the road. And that's the end of my statement.
Agree, Councilmember Lindos. Thank you for your words. Councilmember Dahlquist and Seljevold.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Lindos that we should appoint as our assistant city manager as a temporary acting city manager. And perhaps what Councilmember White had said, table it until next time. And Attorney Shockley could give us each of us information on what our options are for the next step, so we have some time to not rush into a decision. And that would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Dahlquist. Councilmember Seljevold.
Well, I think what basically they were saying, I'm probably going to say the same thing, is that the assistant city manager should be the acting city manager. And then the question is, do we get an interim, and who's going to do it, us or a firm? So that thing can be tabled, but the part is the assistant city manager can be the acting city manager.
Thank you, Councilmember Seljevold. Councilmember Durand.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. I think I'm going to rock the boat a little bit here with what I have to say, but I believe that we need to be careful with who we appoint as interim. We don't want to appoint somebody as interim who might have an interest in the permanent position. Not only would it might give that person an unfair advantage, but it also might expose that person to potentially some issues that they have to deal with that may impact their ability to get the position or to be offered the position. We have union negotiations coming up, and those are never sweet by any means. I think we should look at appointing an interim person who is within our city ranks, but who does not necessarily isn't looking for the permanent position. We have a lot of senior staff who could function very well as the interim, and wouldn't necessarily, could go back to their position once the interim position is over, and no harm, no foul. I worry that we might be setting Dan up to have to go through some issues that aren't pretty. And plus, when you appoint an interim who is currently the assistant, you tend to get fewer applicants, from what I understand, because they figure, well, they're the person interim is already their assistant. The writing's on the wall. So I think that it would be a more fair and more transparent process if we appoint an interim manager who is not looking to hold a position permanently or is not interested in the permanent position. That's all I gotta say.
Hey, Councilmember Durand, I just want to make clear, are you talking about the acting or the interim? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page with your remarks.
I would say we do not want to appoint anybody acting who is interested in either the interim or the permanent position.
Okay, I just want to be clear, because I think we're the only issue.
I apologize if I didn't make that clear.
No, that's okay. Because it goes back to that point of, because Madam City Manager Volkers only has 2 more meetings left. And so she has to start kind of getting these, well, I guess all the information of what's going on to a person probably immediately to ease in that transition. That would be the only caveat that we would have that might be an issue with that if we were
Right,
to delay it.
but with our senior staff and with our, the executive team, I am more than confident that we could find somebody on the executive team who would be willing to step up and fill the acting city manager while we figure out what we've got to do about the interim. And if we want an external firm to help us with the permanent position or whatnot, I am hesitant in appointing somebody acting manager who is interested in the position. Not just because it might give them an unfair advantage, but it might give them a disadvantage as well.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I'll pass it over. I think City Attorney Shockley has some comments on that.
Yeah, so if you were to, if you wanted to appoint the acting city manager to someone who is not the assistant city manager, then you'd need to have some sort of interview process for the acting city manager. My concern is that would be viewed as a potential promotion. In the structure of the organization, you have the city manager, the assistant city manager, and then you have the team that supports the city manager. And so naturally, if something would happen to the city manager, the assistant city manager would be the acting city manager. And so if you're going to elevate somebody from the leadership team into the acting role, I think you'd want to, at a bare minimum, have some sort of interview to make sure that the people that you're choosing to elevate beyond the assistant city manager to the acting city manager position had an opportunity to throw their hat in the ring, because it would be perceived as a opportunity to gain some experience in their career that they might transfer to another position, not necessarily with the organization. And I would note, I think there is, at least my perception is, there is a difference between having an acting city manager who's the assistant and appointing somebody to the interim position. I think it's pretty clear if you appoint somebody to an interim position that is interested in the city manager position, that's viewed as a favorite. I think if you're just maintaining your continuity of operations from an acting standpoint, that's got a little bit different perception than if you appointed them as the interim city manager.
I'll give you a moment, Councilmember Duran, if you want to think about that, unless you wanted to comment immediately.
I appreciate what Attorney Shockley has to say. And I don't want to belabor this process by any means, but if we would appoint the assistant city manager as acting city manager, I could support that, but I am hesitant in appointing anybody within our city leadership who has an interest in the full-time position and the permanent position. And I do not want to appoint anybody as such as interim, if that makes any sense. So I could support assistant city manager as the acting, but I think in terms of interim, we need to find somebody who is not going to apply for the permanent position.
Okay, and I think we've got a couple folks who are in agreement with that. So, okay. Thank you, Councilmember Duran. I still see some hands up. I'm not sure if they're old hands or new hands. So I'm going to assume that the rest that are still up now are new hands. And if they are, then I will defer to Councilmember Hendrickson, then Carlson, then Lindas, then Dahlquist.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know what, when I said we didn't, having the assistant manager be the acting city manager and not do the interim city manager, and then Heidi brought that up. I do agree with that. If we were to get an interim city manager, I agree with Heidi that they shouldn't have interest in the city manager position. But like Heidi said, I don't think we need to look outside. We can get that. We can look internally for that interim city manager who wouldn't have an interest. I didn't think about that, and I think that was mentioned the last time we did have the city manager search. So, but yeah, I do think that's a good idea to have somebody internally who's not interested in the city manager position, but would be agreeable to get the experience in that to take on that interim city manager role. I think that would be good. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Hendrickson. Councilmember Carlson, then Lindas, then Dahlquist.
I'm kind of feeling out the rest of my colleagues that I think they're on the same page as far as appointing Assistant City Manager Molly as the acting, and then coming back on our next council meeting to decide next steps as far as interim and either internal, external, the search process, and that. So, Mr. Shockley, my question is, do you need a motion to appoint Assistant City Manager Molly as the acting city manager? Is that a motion that you need with a vote from all of us, or what's the next step? Because if that's the case, I would like to make that motion.
Yes, you should have a motion to appoint your acting city manager. That helps to designate who the current city manager will transfer those operational responsibilities to. And then we can certainly bring back a menu of options at the next city council meeting about interim versus search firm versus internal, those sorts of issues. But at least we've identified somebody that Chris can hand the ball off to.
So how would I make that motion to have him be the acting city manager until such time?
Yeah, I think it's as simple as you'd make a motion to appoint Assistant City Manager Dan Molly to be acting city manager effective on Chris Folker's last day until such time as an interim city manager is hired or a permanent city manager is hired.
Okay. I would like to make that motion.
Okay. So
I'll second, Deb White.
Christine, I hope you got that.
all right.
So
that motion's been made, seconded, and then I saw, and I think for the record, because I think Councilmember Lindas might have saw that coming, there is a chat, which he also was going to make a motion. Unfortunately, I cannot pull that up on my big screen because I don't have my WebEx running because I'm present. But is there a way that we can look at the chat?
So I just sent a message to you and City Clerk Rust with that motion.
Okay, so it's the same motion.
It's the same motion, yeah.
Okay.
Because I don't think chat is official form of communication.
Well, hey, no one can ever accuse us of not being transparent now. So we got it down. All right. So we've got a motion and a second. Is there, and obviously, is there any further discussion? Councilmember Dahlquist, your hand was still up. Did you wish to have any further comment on this as related to the motion?
Yes, Mayor, thanks. I think we all are in agreement. It's just that we're not understanding exactly the same, but I think we are in agreement. And I too agree with Councilmember Carlson and Lindas. Thank you.
Okay. So just so I'm clear, okay. And then Councilmember Seljevold, your hand is still up. No? Okay, no, okay. Any further discussion, Madam City Clerk? Do you know what our motion is and what we're voting on? or they're voting on? Because I don't get a vote.
No, if I could just have City Attorney John Shockley restate the motion.
So it'd be a motion to appoint Assistant City Manager Dan Molly as the acting city manager, effective on City Manager Chris Volker's last day, until such time as either a interim city manager is hired or a city manager is hired. And then with the understanding that I will bring back options for the city council at the next meeting regarding interim city managers,
Yes.
full-time city managers, internal search versus external search.
That's exactly what I said. Thank you, City Manager Shockley.
Okay. Hey, folks at home, you never know what you're gonna get when we're live, right? So we're all good. All right. So, any further discussion on that? You can thank me later, council members, for causing all this confusion. All right, Madam City Clerk, on you.
Dahlquist,
Yes.
Watson Curry,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Durand,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Seldgevold,
Yes.
Hendrickson, Hendrickson,
Yes, 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 yes.
Lindos.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you, folks, for your comments and your discussion. I'm gonna move it over to item number 18, Mayor and Council reports. Councilmember Hendrickson, as Mayor Pro Tem, I'm gonna hand it over to you for a few minutes. I need to be, sorry, City Attorney Shockley has a comment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe Councilmember Lindas wanted to discuss new business right before we got into mayor and council reports.
Oh, I thought we were switching 21 with 20, or?
Oh, okay. I wasn't clear, so that's
Oh,
fine.
was it? Yeah, I mean, what I got was we would flip-flop new business before the executive session.
Okay, sorry, my apologies.
No, that's okay. But nevertheless, I need to excuse myself from the dais for a few moments, so I will pass it over to Councilmember Hendrickson as Mayor Pro Tem. An unprecedented move, you are now running the meeting virtually from your home, so, excuse me.
How can I tell if somebody raises their hand?
We'll have Madam City Clerk, you can let them know.
I
Okay.
can sit over there and just watch it.
That might work easier.
Does anybody have any reports from the council?
Nobody's raising.
Or they can send it chat too. Go ahead, Christina.
Nobody's raising their hands. Oh, Councilmember Watson Curry.
Go ahead, Councilmember Watson Curry.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. You know, I can't leave you hanging. I want to give you an update always. Let's see. I did want to recognize that our farmers market has started. Last Tuesday was the initial kickoff. So the Moorhead Farmers Market is Tuesdays from 3:30 to 6:30 p.m. in the parking lot of Ace Hardware. So you can pick up some fresh produce and check out some other things that our vendors have to offer. Mayor Pro Tem, I don't know if you also want to touch on it, but we attended virtually the Solid Waste Advisory Committee meeting on May 28th. We're updated on the new cell construction, as well as some potential hiring of a manager out at the county landfill. And while we think about the landfill, let's think about cleanup week, which has been postponed until September. But I did want to remind folks that this week, items can be brought to the solid waste transfer for no cost. You can call 218-299-5464. With further questions, there is some limitations as far as appliances, construction materials, similar to what is allowed on your berm, and of course you will be, you will have to move those things by yourself. I do not believe staff will be assisting. I also wanted to mention that myself and I'm sure, and I know a number of other council members attended the march on May 30th for in recognition of the passing of George Floyd. It was a really phenomenal experience. I've heard accounts of up to upwards of 4,000 or 5,000 attendants, and it was just incredibly moving. So I wanted to thank the organizers of that march. Subsequently, there was a celebration. It was like a long time ago, but it was just Friday on June 5th in Island Park. Kind of a capstone event called One Fargo, celebrating again the life of George Floyd and other members of the Black community whose life had been cut short. So I just really appreciate the peaceful gathering and the efforts that community members put forth to support each other during this incredibly challenging time. And I don't know if we'll get to talk about that more. I think we will in some juncture, but just thanks for those efforts. And I will once again turn off my mic and be quiet. Thank you.
Thank you for the report, Councilmember Sarah Watson Curry. One thing I wanted to mention too with the solid waste committee meeting we'd had last Thursday. They're still accepting electronics at the old place, and it's every Tuesday, and I believe it's from 4 to 6. I don't know if you mentioned that, Councilmember Watson Curry, but they are still doing that. So, and I do see the mayor is back at his post, so he can take it from here.
Thank you, Councilmember Hendrickson. Councilmember, did you want to further report on the solid waste, or is that?
No, that's it for me.
Okay.
Sarah Watson, or Councilmember Watson Curry covered all of it. So it was good to have that meeting. We hadn't had that meeting in about 3 months, so it was good to get virtually back together. And there were some people who did meet in person at the law enforcement center. So it was good. It was good to that's my favorite committee. So it was just good to see everybody and converse. So thanks, Mayor.
And thank you both for your work in that area as well. Councilmember Lindas, I see your hand up. Oh, or not? Did we? Okay, I wasn't sure.
You can't hear me. Yeah, I was just saying that I was cautioning Councilmember Hendrickson about playing favorites, and you're supposed to love all your children equally. But with that being said, I wanted to echo the remarks of Councilmember Watson Curry about the march. I was not able to attend the first march because I was actually in the off-grid, buried in the wilderness. And I'm going to say that coming out and seeing and reading and then participating in the One Fargo event, I really appreciate the organizers, both in Fargo and Moorhead, who stress the peaceful nature and the, I would say, community building process. There's work to be done, but it's great to see that work being articulated in a positive way. And I'm going to give a great shout out because I was really impressed with our own mayor, Judd, and his role in, I've got to say, really stepping up into a challenging leadership situation. And I know you're probably not going to want to toot your own horn, so I will do it for you. It makes Moorhead proud. And that's me.
Thank you, Councilmember Lindas, for your words. Anyone else? Councilmember Watson, your hand is still up. Do you have anything to add? Oh. Sorry. Many people probably didn't hear that. Thank you, Councilmember Lindas, for your words. I really appreciate it. Councilmember Watson Curry. Oh, okay, no worries, no worries. Any other council members wish to be heard? Yeah, I'm not sure. I think, as far as my report, I guess a thank you to the folks for your support. I know it was it was a tough week, to be brutally honest with you. But, you know, I think what really empowered me to say those words was our city. And I think it's representative of the folks that live here, the folks that we have working for our city, and our council members, because I know that, you know, you all have been very supportive of efforts in equity and inclusion in our community. And I want you to know that I really appreciate all the work that you've done individually and the things that you continue to do collectively to make sure that people in our city feel safe and that there's opportunities available for folks here. And I think that's why we all do the work. And so, you know, the energy that you provide our city and the respective groups that you represent and that you work for really are the reasons why our city is great. And obviously I'm biased, but I think we as a city are truly representative of what we can be as a nation. Though we have a diversity of opinions and thoughts, I think it's really, again, an important thing for our residents to know that we truly stick together and we're looking out for the best interests of everyone that lives here. And so, again, I want to send my condolences again to the George Floyd family and also to the family of Officer Holty, again, an MSUM graduate. Cody, I know, was in my class, I think, in Councilmember White. I know probably in your classes as well, as we discussed. And so, you know, it was just really tragic that these last couple weeks have really been just something that was unprecedented on top of the other things that we have going on. So again, thank you each and every one of you for your support of equity and inclusion and diversity efforts in our city to make our city the most welcoming that we can be for all of our families. Madam City Manager.
We're getting all the titles screwed up. Thank you. I just have two quick things. So last meeting I gave a legislative update, and there will be a special session that starts on June 12th. We were hoping the bonding bill would be addressed at that time. There's still a lot of intent to do that. However, given everything that has happened with the protests and the costs and everything associated with that, in addition to the pandemic, we're not sure what's going to happen, but we're very hopeful that they'll take up the bonding bill to some extent, starting June 12th. The second thing is this will flow right into the new business real quickly. I was going to give an update, and I think I still should, on where we're at from a staff perspective on what's the next stage with the pandemic and, you know, looking at reopening buildings or making appointments. And I wanted to give just a brief update, and that would flow well, I think, into Councilmember Lindas's motion. Currently, we're under an emergency declaration. All buildings are closed. Staff are absolutely working full time. There's never been a break in that. I want to make sure I emphasize that. And there are no non-emergency meetings happening or non-emergency subjects. So we've been talking as a COVID command team on what the next phases are. And we're talking about partial reopening and partial lifting of the declaration, which Councilmember Lindas is going to address for action possibly starting June 22nd. We're looking at customers by appointment only, but based on the facility. And here's the big problem, folks. City Hall, there is no way to meet CDC guidelines or Minnesota Department of Health guidelines for social distancing, for sanitizing, and City Hall. It is not possible with the elevators, the people that need to go up to the floors. There's no way to make City Hall appropriately safe. We have looked at everything. We've looked at buying, you know, toilets and sinks and everything that is motion, and we can spend that money if we need to, but you're never gonna get by with how do you get up to the floors without the elevator and sanitizing and one at a time, and this building is so old, it's 50 years old. There's no way to set it up, so we're looking at alternatives with MPS, providing service to customers with our customers. How are they gonna get permits, et cetera, if they need appointments? How are we gonna do that? So City Hall is a huge challenge. So we've really been working hard on that. We want to open it back up to those customers that really need to see us and get in the building. So we'll figure out something, whether it's we go somewhere else or not. That's what we're working on. Yum Comps, we will open based on the State Department of Health recommendation for events. So we have a plan for that when that's allowed. Meetings, including non-meeting, we are going to keep encouraging for this next phase virtually under all conditions, circumstances for everybody's safety. Inspections and contractor meetings, there will be allowed in person with social distancing maintained, and teleworking. We expect to continue that. It's working very well for lots of our staff, and it is keeping our employees safe, which is our priority. So continue to encourage online meetings. Now that's last phase about lifting the emergency declaration completely. That would be a really reopening and a complete lifting of that emergency declaration, but reopening of our facilities. Other than we're going to constantly have the City Hall problem, and we just don't know what we're going to do about that. So we could consider some facilities doing it differently, like wastewater treatment facility. Does that need to be open to the public? Maybe not. Yum Comps, we will follow the State Department of Health, and meetings, we're going to continue to encourage virtual, on occasions in person, if we can meet the CDC guidelines of social distancing and sanitizing. So that's what staff have been working on the last few weeks. I thought that was important for you to know that we're making some headway and we have specific plans. We are not ready. The earliest we could be ready for that next phase, if you're going to talk about adjusting the emergency declaration, would be the next meeting of June 22nd. There's no way for us to be ready by then. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to whoever's next. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam City Manager, for your work and also for the setting up that return to work protocol. I know that you and your staff have had a unique set of dynamics, obviously, with this facility and what's going on. So we do appreciate the work that you and your staff are doing, and that you've tried to do your best to maintain everything and providing city services at full capacity. So we really appreciate that. Thank you to you and your staff.
Yeah, they've done great.
Absolutely. Thank you for that report, and then we'll move on to, we're going to, as stated, go to new business, which will be item number 21, and then come back to number 20. So with new business, I think Councilmember Lindos, or I think you're taking over, and then we'll have a discussion.
Yes, I'd like to move to amend the emergency ordinance regarding holding virtual meetings to allow committees and boards of the City of Moorhead to start meeting virtually in 2 weeks or sooner as staff support allows, to take up non-essential business, and to direct the city manager to develop a long-term plan to transition back to in-person meetings as the state of Minnesota continues to reopen businesses and governmental services to the public. I think I sent that to you, Mayor Judd, prior. I just put this in the chat too for people if they want to read it, so they can digest it. And Mayor Judd, if you wanted to send that to City Clerk, or I could, so that she has it for the minutes.
Yep, I believe that has been sent. No, wait, it's a different one. Do you have it, Madam City Manager? Okay. And so that motion has been made. I do see, I see Councilmember White's hand up. So I don't know if that's for discussion or if that's a second.
Both.
Both, gotcha. So Councilmember White with the hand up with the second, and then also discussion, and we'll pass it to Councilmember White.
I wanted to support this in part because I know while some committees, some boards and commissions have been able to meet, one of the ones that concern me that isn't currently allowed to meet is the Human Rights Commission. And I just think right now with the things that we're experiencing in our community, I think it'd be really valuable. And in part, I wanted to just share some background of the work that the Human Rights Commission has been doing that I think really lays the groundwork for them helping with some of the issues that we're having right now. And so since I am the liaison on that commission, I've seen the things that they've done over the last year. Just about a year ago, we had an alleged hate crime in Moorhead where a young Somali girl was chased by somebody in a van and was hurt pretty seriously. And one of the things that came out of that is right afterwards, when we had our Human Rights Commission meeting, Chief Monroe came to our meeting and was able to talk and answer some questions. And it, you know, one of the things that we realize is there may be those situations where people may not be as comfortable going perhaps directly to the police or others. And if they have someone that they know from their community that could come forward and bring those questions, that it might be a safe place where those things can be discussed. And so that ended up being a really, this kind of the starting point of having this fruitful conversation where there were questions that people had, just, you know, sometimes it's just unfamiliarity with the investigation process. But Chief Monroe was able to answer those questions and allow people to find out how they could get more information. And then after that point, the chief actually appointed Sergeant Chris Martin to be our liaison to the HRC. And then that led to a discussion where HRC decided to actually select as one of their priorities for the year to work on community police relations. And so they've decided to have, to invite Sergeant Martin to be at all of the meetings. One nice thing that they've worked out is if there's a time where some people may not be comfortable, that he's willing to step aside, and otherwise he's there to answer questions. And we've had some good conversations about things like how could we increase representation of people of color in our police explorers and in our Citizens Police Academy. We've talked about recruiting from underrepresented communities in law enforcement, and how we could just work on building some community police relations in informal ways like picnics and things like that. And so it's still in its infancy, but it's laid the groundwork for this collaboration that I think is really valuable and needed now more than ever. And so I think that they would benefit from being able to be working at this time. And the other thing that I'll add is I had the opportunity last week to be on a call for the Minnesota Department of Human Rights organizes meetings with all the members of human rights commissions all over the state. And as far as I can tell, we were the only ones that are not meeting. And so people were kind of surprised when I asked if others had this same barrier because of their emergency declaration, they weren't able to meet. And other than in some cities, if they aren't doing any meetings, like even their council's not meeting, other than that, they're doing virtual HRC meetings too. So just, to me, it makes sense that we make that addition, and it doesn't mean we get rid of the emergency declaration. There'd still be virtual meetings, but that it would be an opportunity to really use that resource and build on the collaborative relationships that we've been developing in that last year.
Thank you, Councilmember White, for that report, for the information, and for your work with the HRC. It's good to know. I do see Councilmember Carlson, your hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just curious what other committees and boards are not meeting. Is it just the HRC, or are there other ones?
This is Councilmember Watson Curry. The MATBUS Advisory Committee has not been meeting, and I think that's in part because their staff is working overtime. And then on the flip side, I'm on the Food Commission, and they've actually had their steering committee meet weekly and virtually, just because food is such an essential part of food access during this time of COVID-19. So both seem appropriate. The business is still continuing for MATBUS, and there's a lot of resources that are out and available for the Cass Clay food partners. I would just say that I agree that the Human Rights Commission definitely plays a part in this larger conversation, and people are looking for positive places to put their energy, and I will be supporting this motion because of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Watson Curry. I wasn't sure if Madam City Manager had heard the question. The question was, were there any other committees or commissions that were not meeting other than the HRC? Councilmember Watson Curry had given her that she's aware of that are not meeting.
Yeah, so, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, there were a large number of our committees that were not meeting, or were meeting on very, very limited topics that were only essential. Charter Commission, Human Rights Commission, I think the airport, there is a EDA, not the EDA itself, but a subcommittee that dealt with covenants and some Makara group. I mean, it really applied across the city, and the whole intent was to expressly limit any type of business that was being conducted to only essential items so that staff could focus on trying to deal with the impacts of COVID-19 on city operations.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Hendrickson, your hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if we do one, we're gonna have to do all the committees, right, to open them back up? We just can't single it out to one committee. Am I right? Am I correct with that, or no?
Correct, and that's why I suggested a motion to change the declaration so it applied to all committees and boards across the city. I think as the city manager had talked about, we're at a point we're ready to have a non-essential business be conducted by the various committees, but they would still be conducting it in a virtual manner.
Do we know, and Councilmember White mentioned it, but are other cities of our size conducting business like that, like Mankato? Does anybody know if they've opened it back up?
I'm not sure, Councilmember Hendrickson. I subscribe to a LMC mayor blog, and I think from what I've read, historically, it varies depending on the jurisdiction. As far as cities of our size, I'm not aware off the top of my head.
Okay.
Good question. I just don't know. Did you have another follow-up? I think we're lagging, low bandwidth.
No, I'm wondering just if it's the right timing. You know that Governor Walz has opened up a bunch of things now, and even indoor seating. So, you know, if it's safe, I worry about the safety of the committee members and safety of you know, people who attend those. So that would be my biggest concern right now. And if it's, you know, if Governor Walz is kind of loosening the restrictions on public, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
Still conducting virtually.
Can you just clarify, this is just virtual?
Yes. Just to clarify, it is only conducting the meetings virtually. We're not ready to have the public attend the meetings in person or the committee members starting.
But I was looking at the long term on that motion. You know, what would be safest? Because there's a second part to that, right?
Yeah.
I understand the virtual, that's fine, but there's a long term of opening back up to where members can come.
Yeah, and I think the intent was to have the city manager kind of develop that plan a little bit more into something that had some concrete dates in it. Because right now it's just a roughed out plan of different phases. But I think with the governor's recent actions, it kind of gives some guidance of when it's appropriate to slowly start opening up city functions to the public.
Okay, again, that's where my last statements were targeted to, so thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hendrickson. I think this is a good sound motion. Again, I think what Councilmember Lindas, Councilmember White, Watson Curry, and others have stated really just makes sense. So I think it's good to go. Any other further discussion? Hearing none, Madam City Clerk.
Dahlquist,
Yes.
Watson Curry,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Durand,
Yes.
White,
Yes.
Seljavold,
Yes.
Hendrickson,
Yes.
Lindos.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you, folks. Then we will go to item number 20, the executive session. I know it's pursuant to law, Mr. City Attorney. However, should I just read all A, B, and C all at once?
It is on the agenda and it's published virtually. You could probably dispense with that for tonight if you'd like and just ask the council to move items 3A, B, and C and go into executive session. But you, of course, if you feel like it, you
I
can.
think in the interest of equity and inclusion, I probably should read these out.
Okay.
So bear with me, folks. So item number 20, A, executive session pursuant to Minnesota statute section 13D.05 subdivision 3, paren B, with the city attorney to discuss potential litigation relating to of construction contracts in the Main Avenue and 21st Street underpass project. 20B, executive session pursuant to Minnesota statute section 13D.05 subdivision 3, paren C, paren 3, for the purpose of developing offers or counter offers for the sale of a portion of Woodlawn Point, generally described as an area between the Red River and Woodland Park Drive, lying north and south of 5th Avenue South. 20C, executive session pursuant to Minnesota statute section 13D.05 subdivision 3, paren B, for the purpose of attorney-client consultation regarding request modification to the lease agreement for the property described as lots 3 and 4, block 1 of the Mighty Ducks addition. Is there a motion to move into executive session?
Councilmember Lindos so moves.
Watson Curry, second.
Motion made and seconded, and I'm assuming no discussion. Madam, roll call, please.
Lindos,
Yes.
Hendrickson,
Yes.
Seljavold,
Yes.
White, White,
Yes.
Durand,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Watson Curry,
Yes.
Dahlquist.
Yes.
Motion carries. We are now in executive session.
things change, the more they stay the same.
All right, can I, again, I can just.
Chris, is it on?
You bet.
I gotta unmute the mic.
Okay, let him unmute it.
No, you go, man, take your time, brother. I hear a burger coming.
Oh, God.
It's gonna be-
Here, burger, I hear.
I feel like there's gonna be some potato lays on that.
Oh, I was just gonna say popcorn. I'm craving for popcorn.
I am going home to grab some lunch or dinner or both.
I had fast food engagement.
That was a long meeting.
Yeah, it was very long. My brain hurts. Got a headache.
Chris, are you ready?
Okay.
All right, it is 9:29 PM, and we are adjourned. Good night, Moorhead. Take care. Stay safe and healthy.